If you think that it's impossible to find a soulmate, I'm here to tell you that respectfully, you're wrong. At 27, 28 years old, I thought it was already too late for me to find long-term commitment. Little did I know that there was already somebody out there for me, my perfect match, and all I had to do was basically all the stuff that I'm going to teach you in this video. Welcome to my comprehensive guide to finding a partner. My name is Janelle, and if you're new here, I normally like to make lifestyle content, but I've been wanting to make this video for a long time because I feel like I was methodical at finding a boyfriend and I need to share it with the world. For context, my boyfriend and I met when I was 28 and he was 33, almost 2 years ago now. Immediately after our first date, I remember telling my friends he just gets it. The best way that I can describe it is when you instantly click with the person, but it's even deeper than that. I felt like he just understood me on a deeper level from the very beginning. But what's important to note is that neither of us got here immediately. It took us inner work, getting clear on what we want, dating other people, rejecting and being rejected. And for him, this went on for years, but if this is the outcome, it's easy to see how all of this work was worth it. I tried to generalize this guide and be as inclusive as possible, and obviously, there's no perfect way to get into a relationship. Everyone has their own preferences, their needs, their wants, etc. But this is what I did, and I feel like it will work for a lot of people, so here it is. I've divided this into 3 phases, and I'm gonna leave timestamps for each of them, so if you wanna go back, you can do that. But I think all of them are super important, so try not to skip them unless you're sure that you have them down. Phase 1 is the mindset shift. This is 100% the most important phase out of all of them, because if you start dating and you have a low self-worth, then obviously you're not going to find the right person. You're going to keep settling and people are going to continue to treat you like a doormat. So before you move on to the rest of this guide, you really need to have this part down. By show of hands, how many of you feel that due to your current circumstances, it'll be hard to find someone because you feel like people will judge you? Or how many of you feel like you're asking for too much and there's no possible way that somebody will fit exactly what you want? Or better yet, how many of you feel like there's straight up nobody out there for you? If you said yes to any of these questions, then honestly, you're not ready for a relationship. You're not even ready to start dating, because if you believe that it'll be so hard to find someone or that there's no one out there for you, people will see right through you. Or you're gonna do things subconsciously that align with this negative mindset, and that's not going to attract the person that you're meant to be with. Like, yeah, you might find someone, but they might not be the right fit for you, because any sort of attention that you get makes you want to feed into it. Because you have such a low self-esteem, you're going to settle. And trust me, I've been there too. Before I met my boyfriend, I lived with my parents. I was in college, but since I'm neurodivergent, it's hard for me to balance college and having a job. And I would think, man, I'm nearly 30 and I'm so behind on life. Everybody my age already lives by themselves or with a roommate. They can afford the things that I want and I can't. Since I'm neurodivergent, I can't do the same things that normal people can do, or that I'm weird because of that. I'm asking for too much. Nobody wants to commit nowadays, etc, etc. And then if I did find another person, I would get so attached to them so quickly because subconsciously I thought that I would never find another person again. And so because of that, I need to hang on to them as much as possible. I would constantly spiral with these negative patterns of thought. And looking at it from the outside, it's easy to see how that hurt me and prevented me from finding the right person that I was meant to be with. So how do we get ourselves out of that negative mindset? The first step that I suggest is to really get a sense of yourself. I've been in relationships where the other person didn't fully support the hobby that I was into, and that was just absolutely miserable. Something that can really hurt us when we're dating or when we're in relationships is when we aren't able to be our true authentic selves to the other person. For me, I would think stuff like, oh, men don't like when girls do this and this. Like, no, if I'm going to be in a potential lifelong relationship with a person, they have to be okay with the things that I like. So this would mean continuing to do the stuff that you love, or maybe even getting into a hobby that you've always wanted to get into. At the same time, you shouldn't get into hobbies that you know you won't like just because your ideal partner would be doing those hobbies. That's kind of moving towards pick-me behavior, and obviously that's really toxic. So don't do that. Figure out what you enjoy and lean into that. Be unapologetic about that. The person that you end up finding is gonna have to be cool with that because you don't wanna hide that part of yourself for your entire relationship. Step 2 is to surround yourself with the right people. One of the easiest ways to challenge your negative thinking is to have others around you challenge it. When I was having all of these negative thoughts, I would voice these thoughts to my friends, and because they're coming from an outside perspective, it was easy for them to see how wrong I was about what I thought about myself. And I would also tell myself, if my friends saw me this way, then there has to be somebody out there who also sees me in this way. I just have to find them. Although this is the easiest way to challenge your thoughts, I don't think this is the most sustainable way. So I would rely more on step 3, but initially this is definitely the simplest way to resolve your negative thoughts. And finally, step 3 is to flip the script. This is a step that I think is the most important at challenging your negative thoughts because for me personally, it has made the most impact. Whenever you find yourself thinking these negative thoughts, your first line of defense is to challenge them yourself. For example, one thing that I used to think was all the good people are already taken. In order to flip the script, I would tell myself, my person is probably getting broken up with right now. By the way, I don't mean this maliciously. This phrase just challenges the finality of the phrase, every good person is taken already. To put it into a better perspective, I would consider myself to be a good person who has been broken up with, and that opened the door for another opportunity to find someone who I matched better with. That's all I meant by this phrase. I'm not wishing for someone to go through a breakup. I'm just saying it's a possibility, and that every good person is taken already is a phrase that is not completely final. Or to go back to what I said earlier about like how I'm behind on life because I'm still in college, I don't have a job, blah, blah, blah. A good way to flip the script on that is to say, well, I'm in college right now and I'm working towards something. And if somebody doesn't see how hardworking I am, then they're not meant to be in my life. And then lastly, I feel like a bunch of people might think this, but nobody likes me. You only need to find one person. That's all that matters. So yeah, it's important to challenge your negative thoughts. I know it's hard in the beginning, but definitely keep working on it. If there are some negative thoughts that you struggle with, ask your friends how you can flip that script. Or you can write them in the comments and I'll respond with a way that you can flip the script. Now let's get into phase 2, which is to get clear on what you want. When you're out dating, it's really, really important that you understand what you want in a partner. So start to think about what are their likes, their dislikes, their hobbies, what they look like if you care about that, how they treat you, how important family is to them, what they wear. The list goes on. This is where I normally start to lose people because I don't know what it is. Maybe people don't believe me. Maybe they don't think that this works. But I'm here with my soulmate. And I don't say that lightly either. And not only is he the ideal person that I want to be with, but I'm the ideal person that he wants to be with. So say what you will about this phase, but I think it's really important. So what I did was I wrote down any and every single thing that I wanted in a partner. I basically wrote down bullet points in my notes app. And my boyfriend also had an idea of what he wanted in his head, but he's never really had a problem with being in the wrong relationships because he's always been pretty selective of who he dated. So if you're like me and you've frequently found yourself in a relationship with the wrong people, then definitely you need to write down a list and get clear about what you want. I'm gonna share my list, and I wrote this in July of 2021, which was only a few months before I met my boyfriend. Some of these are gonna sound dumb because I was a little bit delusional at the time, but in the end, I did end up finding my boyfriend, so it probably pays to be delusional. Also, I blurred out a couple of these because they are inappropriate, so just ignore that. So let's talk about some of them. For example, number 9 says Asian, and I wrote this down because I feel like Asians have like a shared experience, but he didn't actually fit this perfectly. My boyfriend is half Korean, half Brazilian, but he identifies more with like his Brazilian side, and it worked out because I feel like Brazilian culture is very similar to Filipino culture. So yeah, that's one of the things where he hit, but like he didn't hit it exactly, but he still hit it. He literally fits all of these. Some of these are really specific and he still hit them. One thing that was super important to me was that he gets along with my brother, and my brother and him get along so well. They like All of us like cars, and I think that helps a lot because out of all three of us, I feel like my brother is like the one that is most into cars, but it really helps that he's into cars. He is a really great cook. And I wrote this because I do not cook. Because I'm neurodivergent, I tend to forget things. Yeah, I lose track of what I'm doing constantly. It's just not a good hobby of mine. Like, I've tried it and it doesn't work. So I needed somebody who's a good cook. One thing that was kind of like weird was number 16, which is on the same wavelength as me. This kind of goes into what I said at the beginning where like he just gets it. And that's like super hard to explain, but he did hit this one and I noticed it immediately. So yeah. Number 27, likes cars, optional but preferred. I wrote optional but preferred because sometimes the car community can be a little bit toxic, and obviously I don't want to be with somebody who's toxic. Thankfully, my boyfriend is very wholesome and I'm very lucky that he also likes cars. And finally, number 30 is kind of a given. Just somebody who understands me and accepts me for who I am. Honestly, everybody should have that on their list. I do want to add that you don't have to reference this list throughout your dating process. I personally didn't look at this list the entire time I was dating and ended up completely forgetting about it. But I still think it's super important to write everything down so that it's clear in your mind what you want. A lot of people like to associate this method to some form of manifestation. At this point, I'm not sure if it was manifestation or if it was just me finally understanding what I want in a person after writing this list. But either way, it works and you should not skip this step. Like I said, he hits everything on this list. Maybe not exactly, but in some way, shape, or form, he does hit everything on this list. And that's your proof that getting clear on what you want is very important. Phase 3 is dating. Okay, so this is the part where you really start to take action. Once you've successfully shifted your mindset, started to figure out who you truly are at your core, and once you've written down who your ideal partner is. If you start to find yourself shifting back into those negative mindsets, which does happen occasionally during this phase, continue to challenge them and flip the script, because this part is going to be super hard if you're still not good at challenging your negative thinking. So continue to work on that and you'll get better eventually, trust me. And we'll also talk about a couple of negative phrases that do tend to pop up during this phase. I personally think that the easiest way to go through this phase is through dating apps. And I know a lot of people still want to meet other people organically, and I will go over how you can do that, but for me personally, this is how I met my boyfriend. And I think if you go about using dating apps in the correct way, then it could be very useful for you. Just for reference, my boyfriend and I have met through Hinge, which I think is going through some trouble right now. I don't know how the culture is around dating apps at this point, but back then I mainly wanted to use Hinge because I personally felt like there were more people on there that were looking for long-term commitment, but you could find anyone on any dating app. This is just from my personal experience. I don't fully remember how I set up my dating profile, but I do remember specifically that I wrote that I like cars, books, and anime. To be honest, I was a little bit afraid of writing cars and books on there because I felt like guys who weren't into cars or books might feel a little bit intimidated by me, but that was one negative thought that I had to challenge. So to flip my script, I would tell myself, if a guy feels intimidated by me, then I don't want to be with them anyway because that just shows how insecure they are. So then I would go through the typical use of dating apps. You know the drill. If I like them, I would try and match with them, etc., etc. If I match with a person, the next course of action would be to chat with them and make sure that I vibe with them. And here's kind of where things start to get a little bit discouraging because this is where people start to ghost, or maybe they're straight up not a good person. And it's easy for your self-worth to decrease during this time just because of the way other people act. Like, I would get ghosted and I would think, if they just went on a date with me, they can see how great of a person I am. But you really can't control the way that people are. You just have to accept that stuff like this will happen. And this is where you have to flip the script again and be like, well, I wouldn't want to date anyone who would ghost me anyway. And then just move on. Or maybe even put yourself in the other person's shoes and think, well, maybe they just weren't comfortable telling me that they were no longer interested. Or maybe they were talking to somebody else that they like more and they wanted to pursue them instead. Try not to take things personally. That was definitely a problem that I had, but that's why phase 1 of this guide is so important, because this stuff will pop up very frequently, especially when you're dating. So you have to be really good at challenging those thoughts. If you are still wanting to meet people organically, I do have a couple of tips. This is just not how my boyfriend and I met, so I can't attest to how good they are. But the first tip that I have is to continue pursuing your hobbies. If your hobbies are dominated by a certain gender, like my hobbies are books and reading, which is normally dominated by women, and my other hobby is cars, which is normally dominated by men, maybe try and find a hobby that is more inclusive. Again, you don't want to pursue a hobby just because of the type of people that are in it. You want to pursue a hobby because you genuinely like it or are interested in it. I do know that certain sports like climbing are very inclusive and foster a supportive environment. So if you can find something like that, that would be ideal. Second tip is to get comfortable hanging out with yourself. Just because you're single doesn't mean you can't have the same experiences as people in relationships. For example, go to a coffee shop or a bar by yourself. You never know when you might get approached by someone, and since you're by yourself, that signals to the other person that you may possibly be single. Or to go by my climbing example, maybe go to the climbing gym by yourself. And since you're probably already doing something that you both love, then that makes things a lot easier. My third tip is to not be afraid to ask someone if they're single, and more importantly, be prepared if they are not single. And also, you're missing out if you don't try and ask somebody if they're single. And then my fourth tip, let your friends and or family know. This one's pretty self-explanatory. They might already know somebody who is also single that they can set you up with, or maybe they will eventually come across somebody who is single. This is a dating phase, so I have to tell you to go out on dates. Even if you don't feel like a person will fit your ideal person, you still want to go out on dates with people that you vibe with, because first of all, this will boost your confidence, this will improve your social skills, or at the very least, this will improve your skill at shifting your mindset. For me, it was definitely hard for me to go out on dates at first because it's hard to meet new people. It's hard to put yourself out there. It's scary and you feel like you might get judged. But if it means finding your person at the end, you have to be willing to put in that work. These dates can go one of three ways. They can either go great, okay, or bad. And they can go great, okay, bad to varying degrees. But this is generally how they will go. If they go great, this is pretty self-explanatory. Continue to date that person. If they continue to hit all of the points that you wrote down in phase 2, then awesome, congratulations. Things start to get a little bit iffy when the date goes okay. Sometimes you can go out on dates with people who are really nice and you have a lot in common with them, but for some reason or another, something is just not exactly the way that you want it. Like maybe you don't have the same sense of humor or something. Like there's nothing wrong with the person necessarily, but you kind of feel like they're not the right fit for you. And this might be a little bit controversial, but I would say that you should be willing to let them go. And also have the courtesy to let them know that you don't want to move forward. Don't try to lead them on or hang on to them waiting for somebody else to sweep you off your feet. Lastly, if the date goes bad, I feel like this one's also self-explanatory, but every once in a while you'll find yourself on a date where for some reason or another it goes really bad. If it goes bad because you don't like the other person, maybe your values don't align with theirs, it's probably easier to let them go than if the date went okay, because you have an excuse to let them go. Accept that there are people out there that you could potentially go on a bad date with, and then all you can do is move on. Try not to dwell on that stuff and continue to make room for the person that you're meant to be with. The great thing about dating apps is that you can really minimize the amount of bad dates that you go on, just because you can go on their profile and see what type of person they are before you even start talking to them. Or you can even put filters on dating apps so you don't even see the people that you don't want to date. In this case, the only way that you could really go on a terrible date is either if the person lied on their dating profile or if you lowered your standards just to go on a date. The last thing that I want to add is that I totally understand that this dating process is super difficult and I definitely simplified it, but I feel like if you do the things that I talked about in phase 1 and phase 2, this part will be so much easier. All it is having clear boundaries, not only with the other person, or any person that you date, but also with yourself. Because like I said earlier, we do tend to settle when our self-worth is really low. So be clear on what you want in a partner, and always, always, always remind yourself that you are worthy of that partner. I can make a more specific video for women or people in their feminine energy, because there are things that I did during the dating phase that were specific to me being feminine and wanting to be treated as such. So definitely let me know if that's something that you're interested in seeing. I just wanted to make a general video on this because I know not everybody is the same identity as I am, but I still wanted to help as many people as I can. So again, if you have any negative thoughts that you are struggling with right now, please leave them in the comments down below. If you want to be vulnerable, I will 100% challenge them and give you a way to flip the script on that. Let me know if this was helpful for you. I know it's not going to be like immediate results, but yeah, let me know. But at least let me know if you're getting better at challenging your negative thoughts, because I think that's the most important thing. Like this video if you enjoyed watching, subscribe for more content from me. I really, really appreciate everybody who watched this video, and I will see you in my next one.